of fun. All right, so sign up to get water baptized, sign up for Worship and Production Academy. Last announcement. Next week, there's 80 of us that will be on our mission trip to Arlington, so there will be no service in here next week. Next week, we'll have service across the street over in Big Church with the adults. But be here the week after that for sure, because that is our first week where we are launching our 2024 Bridge Youth Summer Olympic Games, okay? We do the Summer Olympics every 2 years, okay? Last time France won. If you're on the France team, you know what's up. So what we'll do is we'll split everyone into country teams. You'll have your own country, your own color. We'll play games every Wednesday during the beginning of service. We'll still have worship. We're still going to do an awesome sermon series called Running, and we're talking about how do we run this race with God that's called life. We're going to go over very, very basic, foundational spiritual disciplines this summer. We're going to talk about prayer and fasting the first week, water baptism the first week, prayer and fasting the next week, Bible reading the week after that. We're talking about worship, going to church, and then finally being baptized in the Holy Spirit. So be here all summer for Summer Olympics. It's going to be fun, and the winning Summer Olympic team is going to get a free trip to Six Flags after probably sometime in August or September we'll go. So show up for Summer Olympics, not next Wednesday, but the Wednesday after that. Sound good? You guys seem a little tired tonight. Y'all tired? Yeah? Listen, you guys still not recovered from camp. Understand. Hey, boys in the front, look up here. Hey, tonight I want to talk to you about something who I feel like will speak to a lot of us in the position we're in, especially coming back from camp and seeing all the cool and awesome things and hearing the cool and awesome testimonies a lot of you guys shared about what God did in your life at camp. If you feel like God did something special, come tell me about it. Come tell one of the interns about it. We'd love to give you the opportunity, just like Kale, to share a testimony in the coming weeks. But tonight I want to talk to you about keep the change. Everybody say, keep the change. Come on, say it louder. Keep the change. Yeah, I'm gonna have to bring the energy tonight because I feel like it's just not here with you guys. All right, hey, keep the change. Keep the change. Understand? Listen, when I was a kid, I thought this statement, "keep the change," was the most baller statement you could say. Okay, because I grew up poor. I grew up poor, okay? I grew up single mom. I grew up for a lot of years in a trailer park down in Norman, okay? I learned skills growing up that only poor young men of single moms know, right? I know, when your water gets turned off with the city, I can go out there with the smallest screwdriver. It doesn't matter, and I can turn it back on. And I know, but I got to turn it back off before the next morning, otherwise they're going to come back off and put a padlock on it. I knew that because every month our water would get turned off. I'd have to go out there and turn it on. I grew up poor, and so I thought keep the change. But you guys just got money to waste. You're letting these people keep your change. What are you talking about? I remember growing up, my grandpa, though, he was rich. They lived in Texas. So, every summer we go down to Texas for a month, and we got to live, the way people with money got to live. And my grandpa, he had a wallet. And it was a wallet like I'd never seen before. You open the wallet, and the money was just in the middle of the wallet. I didn't understand. I always knew wallets like the pockets. And as I grow older, I realized it was a money clip wallet. And I thought if I got a wallet like that, then I would always have money in my wallet. And so I bugged my mom one year, all year, I want a money clip wallet like Granddad. I want a money clip wallet like Granddad. So she went to Walmart, got me a cheap money clip wallet. And I realized really fast, just because it has a money clip don't mean I got money in it, And so that was one of my first big disappointments. But I remember my grandpa, he would always hand someone, at a restaurant, or we'd take us to the gas station or snow cones or whatever, and he'd hand, a $20 bill, two $20 bills, whatever, to pay for us and all the grandkids stuff. And he'd always say, what I thought was the most baller statement ever was keep the change. Keep the change. Keep the change. And so, like I said, I grew up, my mom waiting tables. And so the older I got, what I realized it was generous people like my grandpa who had, just like him in Texas, but we lived in Norman. We lived on South Oklahoma City for a while. When my mom was waiting tables, it was generous people like him that would tell my mom, keep the change, that would bless our life and was the money that she would live on because she waited tables. Keep the change. Keep the change. Keep the change. Now, if we fast forward to today, I got a little something else about keep the change. We just got a new car, okay? It's new to us. It's not a new car. And the worst thing I hate about cleaning out my car all the time is the cup holder full of change, right? Or the ashtray thing full of change, or the car door hole full of change. Because you start off just putting change in it, and somehow over the years, you spill a soda in it, or a snow cone drops in it, or your kid throws Cheerios in it. That's just for me. And by the time you go to sell your car or clean your car, you can't get the change out because it's like cemented into the cup holder, and it's all jacked up, and you're sitting there and like, this change is nasty. I can't even use this change if I wanted to. So since we got this new car, I got a new rule. No loose change in the car, okay? Throw it out the window, make it hail on someone. I don't care. I just don't want loose change in the car, okay? So what I've started doing, like if you go back to the sound booth right now, there's change on the countertop. Do you know why? Because I'm making sure change is in my car. I put it in my pocket. I come in here. I throw it on the sound booth counter. There's a little collection going. If you go to my office, there's a mason jar. Just from since we've had this car, not even a month, I put a mason jar in my office. So when I go in there, if I got change, I got someplace to put it. Because I don't want change in my car, but I also don't want change in my pockets. I hate things being in my pockets. If you go in my house now, it's only been a month. We have 2 mason jars sitting right when you walk into the right. Don't rob my house. It's just pennies, I promise. 2 mason jars almost full of change just from the last month because I've been putting the change in, putting the change in. And what I've realized more than ever this last month is change adds up. Change adds up. And a lot of you guys have experienced life change in your life, whether it was at camp or recently or years and years ago. Maybe you had an experience with God and you experienced life change. And what you realize the older you get is that change adds up, good and bad. Bad change adds up, good change adds up. But tonight I want to talk to you about keeping the change. Keeping the change. This is the thing, is change is hard. Change is hard. When God calls you to change something, when God calls you to change into a new season, change into a new friend group, change into a new career if you're an adult, change is hard. Why? Because it's not what we're used to. It's not what we're comfortable in. Remember a few weeks ago, we talked about to walk into what God has for you means you're going to have to walk out of your comfort zone. When God called his disciples, he called them out of their comfort zone into what he had for them. Change is hard. So it's easy to hear from God and hear what he wants you to do. It's a whole nother thing doing it, and it's a whole nother thing keeping it. How do you keep the change, students? How, when you feel like God is impressing on your life to do something, to go someplace else, to leave someone, how do you do it, but how do you stay? How do you keep the change that God has called you into last week at camp? Last week at camp, God gave many of you guys very, very specific words and instructions and things he wants you to do. And as soon as you got home, you started making compromises. You started saying, well, I'm going to go this far, but God, I'm not going to go that far because this far is enough. And you've already started losing the change that God has been calling you into. How do you keep the change? There's 3 types of people who change, students. This is it. People who give up before they start. This is New Year's resolution change. This is me every time I want to lose weight, okay? I'm like, I'm going to start my diet this day. I was supposed to start a diet yesterday, right? I got home from Stafford Tree. I told Dawn, when I get home from Stafford Tree, I need to lose 20 pounds this summer. I'm starting a diet. And then all of a sudden, last night, it's 9:30 at night, and I'm driving home with 2 super big ices from OnQ, a king-size salted caramel Twix, and those like sweet tar ropes. For me! I got done something else, okay? I'm like, gosh, how do I keep this change? Because change is hard. You give up before you even start. Yeah, I got cavities. I know, I get it. There's people who give up before they even start. It's not for me. They feel like they can't change. Secondly, there's people who sprint into change. And if you're a runner, if you're a sprinter, you know that you can sprint for a while, but you can't sprint for long. And you sprint into change because you get excited about what God did. You get excited about camp. You get excited about God moving into your life, and you sprint home. But so soon you're running too fast, you can't keep up with yourself, and you get tired and you stop. And you can't keep the change because you can't sprint forever. Literally, this is a long race, guys. We're talking about this all summer in our series. How do we keep the change? How do we run this race lifelong with God and not get tired and not grow weary? Because when you're sprinting, it's hard to keep going. How do you keep the change? Well, you got to start, and you can't sprint. You got to keep going because there's people who give up before they start, and there's people who sprint and hold on for a strong period, and then there's people who keep the change. There's people who keep the change in their life for lifelong. Do they fall? Do they mess up sometimes? Yes. But they consistently grow further and further and further. When they take 2 steps back, they take 5 steps forward because they've learned how to keep the change in their life. Now, what's hard is, and what I struggled with when I was your age, when I would go to camp and go to on a mission trip, and God would move my life here in Bridge Youth on keeping the change, is I felt like I had change battle fatigue. Because I would come to the altars and I knew I needed a change. God would tell me what I would do to change. I would leave and I would try to change, but I would never make the change. I know I have change battle fatigue. I felt like, why would I come and try to change again? Because I've tried so many times and I just don't think it's possible. And that will keep you from trying to change in your life. It's a learned helplessness. It's helplessness that you feel you can never change because of all the times you have tried and you have failed. Because all the times you said you were going to change, you felt like you were supposed to change, but you never kept the change. It's not I want you to realize is that keeping the change means killing the excuses. Everybody say excuses. To keep the change, you got to kill the excuses. Every time I see a person or I see a group in the Bible that God is calling to change, that God is leading them into something new, into freedom, into a more abundant life or to what He has for them. Every time I see these people in the Bible, there's a point in the story where they have an excuse on why it would make more sense for them not to keep the change than to keep the change in their life. They encounter a resistance. They find people that are telling them something different than what God's calling them to, and they start making excuses or making compromises in their mind for them not to keep the change. So how do you keep the change? You have to kill the excuse. You have to not walk in, they don't walk what God has for them. They do not keep the change. They either, what do? They embrace the change, they embrace the excuse and they lose the change. Sometimes they embrace the excuse, they still try to keep the change but end up losing anyway because they're sprinting. Or they kill the excuse and they keep the change. To keep the change, you have to kill the excuse. So what does it look like? What excuses do we need to kill in order to keep the change that God is calling us to? Right? What excuses do we need to kill to kill the excuses instead of going back to what and to who you were before God called you into this change? What excuses you got to kill? What excuses cause us to lose change in our life? There's so many. But tonight I want to start and share with you 6 of the most common excuses that I believe are being told to people right now tonight in this room, this very day, the very week of change that God's calling you into. I feel like you already have an excuse you're fighting since God's called you into the change. And these are all 6 excuses that I have fought in my life very, very often. It's very personal and I want to share with you. These are excuses that we got to kill. These are excuses that cause us to lose the change because we want to keep the change because change adds up. The first one is this: no harm, no foul. Well, it's no harm, no foul. What does that mean? No harm, no foul is a saying. So maybe your parents say it, maybe some of you don't know what it means. What it means is this, well, what's it really hurting? Well, who's it really hurting? It's just hurting me. It's not hurting. There's no harm being done, really, so there's no foul. No harm, no foul. Is it really a big deal? Is it really hurting someone? We see this with a man named Achan. In the Old Testament, in Exodus, there's a guy named Achan. What happens is God's people are going to take over a town called Jericho. Jericho is a town that God had given into His people, to the Israelites, and they have to go take this town over. But God tells them, listen, when you take this town over, you don't keep anything for yourself. You don't keep any gold. You don't keep any jewelry. You don't keep any possessions. You don't keep anything for yourself. And what Achan did was he didn't listen. He took some change, all right? He took some money, he took some gold, he took some items. He hid them in his tent under a rug. You know why? Because Achan thought, no harm, no foul. Who's going to miss this much? We plundered a whole city. Who's going to miss this little bit that I took? Is it really going to hurt someone? There's no harm, there's no foul. But what happened was God knew. And his sin caused Israel to lose the next battle to a town called Ai. Jericho, if Jericho is the state of Oklahoma, Ai is the city of Minko. Jade, not to pick on you, I just saw you. Okay, Jericho's huge, Ai is little. And guess what? They beat Jericho, but because of Achan's sin, they lost to Ai. God made them lose to Ai. So what Achan thought was no harm, was no foul, it really did affect people. It affected the whole country of Israel. You know, it also resulted in 36 men dying in that battle of Ai. It also caused Achan and his whole family were stoned to death when they found out it was Achan who took the things and hid them from God. You can read all about this in Joshua chapter 7. But Achan believed the lie, no harm, no foul. Let me ask you, students, are you? Let me tell you, listen, no decision you make only affects you. Even if you think it does, I promise you, no decision, no action that you are taking only affects you. There will always be someone else that a bad decision that you make affects, always. It may be now, it may be a parent, it may be a sibling, it may be your future family that it affects years and years from now. But I promise you, your decisions, your actions, they have harm and they have foul. Don't believe the lie. Don't believe you got to kill the excuse to keep the change. You got to kill the excuse, no harm, no foul. Listen, there is harm. And really, how do you know? How do you know it's really not harming you? Just because it's not harming you right now doesn't mean it won't harm you in the future. Listen, for like 100 years, they smoked cigarettes thinking cigarettes were healthy for you. They smoked cigarettes thinking there was no bad health benefits about cigarettes. And now we know it is cancer in a stick. I know, listen, that you might think like sucking on a vape every time you get in your car isn't really hurting you now, but you don't know. You don't know what, it might not hurt you physically, it might hurt you mentally with introducing an addiction into your life. And it's like this with so many things, with pornography and addictions that you deal with. It might not harm you right now, but I promise it will harm your future marriage. Don't believe the lie, no harm, no foul. Kill the excuse. It's true about addiction. It's true with your life. It's true with things you watch and things you listen to. Oh, this music I listen to is no harm, no foul. It's just in my car. It's just myself. But you don't understand is it's creating patterns of thinking in your brain. It's desensitizing you on how you treat others and how you treat women and how you respect authority. It's affecting you. There is harm. There is foul. It's true about your work ethic, students. Listen, right now you'd be like, I can sleep in on Sunday. I don't have to listen to my parents. There's no harm, no foul. No. Because you're creating habits in your life that's going to affect your future. Kill the excuse. Keep the change. Don't believe the lie. No harm, no foul. The second, 1 Timothy 5:24 says this. The sins of some are obvious. We all know those people, right? The sins of some are obvious. We all know what they're doing. Reaching the place of judgment ahead of them. And the sins of others trail behind them. What does trail behind them imply? It implies this. Eventually, it's going to catch up. Sin has a play day and sin has a payday, students. The second excuse we got to kill is this. Well, hey, no one will know. No one will know. Will anyone really know if I do this? No one will know. Back to the example of Achan, I'm sure that's what he thought because he hid it. He hid the gold under a rug in his tent. But again, this is a lie of an excuse. There are always, always, always two people who know. Who are the two people who know? You. You know. And you know this to be true. Who is harder on yourself but you? Who is more critical of yourself but you? Don't you want to believe the best in yourself? Don't you want to believe in yourself that you can change? You will know. No, you will know and you will feel guilty and you will not be able to live with yourself. You will know. God always knows. You have to live with yourself. There's no one harder on you than you. Make it easy to be gracious to yourself. Make it easy to be loving to yourself because you will know. You will. And God will. God will know. God will know, and guess what, students? God will ask you about it. It says in Hebrews 4:13 that nothing in all creation is hidden from God's sight. Everything is uncovered and laid bare before the eyes of him who we must give an account. We must give an account. What does that mean? It means one day we will stand before God, and He will ask you about the things you thought no one will know. And He will ask you about the things you hope no one will find out. And it will be you alone. It will not be your friends standing with you. It will not be your parents standing with you. It will not be your grandma standing with you who drug you to church on Sundays. No, it will be you. God will know. And you will give an account to Him for the actions and the things that you did. He knows. To embrace the excuse no one will know means this. It means you're being sneaky. It means that you're having to hide and sneak around to do whatever you're being tempted to do and to be whoever you're being tempted to be. And listen, students, sneaking and hiding and lying should all be a red flag that you are starting to lose the change in your life, when you are starting to delete things and hide things and lie about things. To keep the change, you got to kill the excuse. You will know and God will know, and that should be good enough for you to want to keep the change in your life. The third one tonight is this. Well, at least I'm not as bad as them. At least I'm not doing what they're doing. This is like the classic good kid excuse for losing the change in their life. This is like the classic church kid excuse for losing the change in their life. They compare themselves to others. They compare their actions to others. They compare their lives to others. And as long as you are better than the others, then you think you're good, but you're not. Listen, students, God is calling you to be better than someone. God is not calling you to do better than someone else. God's not calling you to look better than someone else. God is calling you to be the best you that He wants you to be, because He knows exactly who you can be because He created you. He knows what you're capable of. When you focus on just being better than others, you will never reach your full potential. And guess what? You'll never reach theirs either. Wanting what God has for someone else just means you'll never get what God has for you or them, because you'll miss what He has for you, and you can never get what He has for them because He didn't have that for you in the first place. Do not believe the lie that living a life for God means just doing better than others. No. Living a life for Jesus means being the best you that He is leading you to be, because He knows who and what you can be capable of to achieve. Well, I'm better. At least I'm not doing what they're doing. Yeah, but are you doing what you're supposed to be doing is what God's asking you. In Luke 18, starting in verse 9, it says, to some who were confident of their own righteousness and looked down on everybody else, Jesus told them this parable. So who's Jesus telling this parable to? To people who were confident of their own righteousness and looked down on everybody else. It was those that said, look at me, I'm more spiritual than them. That's who Jesus is talking to in this parable. It says this, 2 men went up to the temple to pray. One was a Pharisee and the other was a tax collector. What does this imply? A Pharisee was someone who knew the laws of God, who lived their life to try to please God because they did what was right according to the law. The tax collector was someone who didn't care about following Jesus. It was someone who manipulated and did unethical things to gain money. And so Jesus is setting this story up to say, look, there's this guy who knows exactly what they're supposed to be doing, and there's this guy who doesn't. There's this Pharisee and there's this tax collector. The Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, God, I thank you that I am not like other people, that I am not like robbers and evildoers and adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give 1/10 of all I get. But the tax collector stood at a distance. He would not even look up to heaven, but beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me. I am a sinner. And then Jesus said, I tell you that this man, rather than the other, went home justified before God. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and all those who humble themselves will be exalted. Listen, kill the excuse that, well, at least I'm not like them. At least I'm not doing what they're doing. Because God is not worried about you being like anyone other than who He created you to be and to do what He has called you to do. To keep the change in your life, you got to kill that excuse of comparison to others. I got 3 ones I'll go over real quick. This fourth one was not my fault. It's not my fault. I call them, you guys know what like flamethrowers are? I call this the blame throwers. They throw blame on everyone but themselves. Well, you know, Pastor Riley, if she wouldn't have texted me that, then I wouldn't have done, you know what, Pastor Riley, I came home, my mom, she just didn't understand. She was yelling at me. You know, if they wouldn't have, then I wouldn't have, and they throw blame on everybody but themselves. It's not my fault. You got to kill the excuse, students. The only one who will stand before God one day and give an account for your life and for your words and for your actions and your thoughts is you. Don't you want to take control of your life and stop giving power and putting your power to keep the change in the hands of someone else? Because that's what you're doing. You're saying that, well, they are making me this way. Listen, students, as long as they're making you that way, then you're giving them the power, the only power to change you. Take control of your life. Kill the excuse that is not your fault. Keeping the change for many of you is going to mean accepting responsibility. It's going to take doing the hard thing that you know God keeps telling you to do and stop listening to others who are telling you that there's another way. And they're making you question what God has spoke to you and leading you to do. You got to kill the excuse that it's not my fault. Take responsibility. Own up. The fifth one is this. This is the excuse that every time I started messing up, it was this excuse. Every time in my life, and it's this. Well, just this once. You know, maybe let me see how close I can get without falling. Then you're surprised when you fall. Just this once. Listen, students, understand, I am facing this way, and I say, well, if I'm just going to look this way just this once, boom, my direction's changed. Just this once changes your entire direction. And your direction is what changes your destiny. Just this once, you're already changed. You're going, you're moving in that direction. No, not at all. How about that? It's a David and Bathsheba. David, he was a king after God's own heart. It says that no one had pleased the Lord with their life up to this point like David had. And David was king. David had everything. And it says this in 2 Samuel chapter 11, verse 1. It says, in the spring, at a time when kings go off to war. So it's spring, and kings are supposed to be at war. Guess where David is not? For just this once, David stayed home. It says, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army. They destroyed the Amorites, and they besieged Rahab. But David remained in Jerusalem. Understand, students, David didn't realize, because what happens is David goes up on his roof and David sees a girl in the bath, taking a bath on her roof, and David says, bring her to me, and David messes up and gets her pregnant, and David's whole life is destroyed because just this once, David didn't go out to war. And it's not just David's life. Remember, it's not just you that it affects. David's kids were affected. The whole kingdom of Israel was affected for the entire rest of the country's history because of just this once. Just this once. No, stop it. Kill the excuse. Not this once, because you're about to change your direction and move back into what God has been calling you out of. And the last one is this. This is my excuse that comes out of my mouth every day. I forgot. I'm forgetful. I forget my keys, I forget my wallet, I forget everything. But students, do not forget how you felt when you were living the life that God called you out of. Do not forget the places and the people and the things that was destroying your life. Don't forget. It's like we have faulty memory. We forget how bad it was. We forget how far back we were. God, when he called the children of Israel out of Egypt, his people, they had been enslaved to the Egyptians for over 500 years. Enslaved, working and having minimal food and resources, and God called them out of Egypt. And guess what? 6 weeks, they'd been on the road 6 weeks going to the promised land, and they were already complaining. They're like, well, at least in Egypt we had food. Out here we have no food. At least in Egypt we had beds and houses. Here we don't have any houses. They had forgotten. That they were enslaved and God had set them free. They had forgotten. Do not forget, students, what God is calling you out of. Kill the excuse. Don't embrace the excuse and lose the change. Don't embrace the excuse and try to keep the change and end up losing it anyway. No, kill the excuse and keep the change. Keep the change. Keep the change. You have to kill the excuse to go back to what and who you were before. That's when you don't kill the excuse, you'll go back. But when you keep the change, you will move forward. These are the excuses that cause us to lose the change. No harm, no foul. Well, no one will know. Well, I'm not as bad as them. It's not my fault, just this once. Oh, I forgot. So how do you keep the change? You kill the excuse. Well, how do you kill the excuse? This is what you do. You need to tell others. You need to tell others what God is telling you that you need to do, so that then you need to ask them to hold you accountable. You need to say, hey, this is what I believe God is telling me to do. And when you make sure I do it, will you slap me in the face when I don't do it and say, hey, you know what God's calling you to do? And probably don't tell the person that God's trying to lead you away from. They don't need to hold you accountable. You need to tell someone else who will do it. You need to have a plan. You need to have a plan. What do you do if they do this? What do you do if you want to do this? What do you do when you feel this is a need in your life? I used to be like, well, I'm going to go outside. When I would feel temptation to do something I know God had called me out to do, I said, I'm going to go outside, because guess what? I can't do it in my front yard. I can't do it in my backyard. I can't do it. So I had a plan. You got to have a plan. And you got to set yourself up for success. Do not put yourself in situations that will tempt you just this once. Do not put yourself in situations that will tempt you. Well, no one will know. No. Keep the change. Tonight, students, I want you to just close your eyes and bow your heads. And tonight, I just want to pray for everyone who wants to keep the change in their life. Just bow your heads so you can focus on yourself. If you say, Pastor Riley, I feel like God has been changing things in me recently, and I want strength. I want boldness. I want courage to keep the change that He has called me into. Will you just raise your hand right where you're at so we can pray for you? Absolutely. Absolutely. If you'd raise your hand, would you just stand up where you're at and come down here and spend some moments with God and ask Him, God, what excuse do I need to kill to keep this change? If you have a friend who's coming down, come pray for them. We're going to spend time in prayer. We're going to spend time in worship. But do not leave until you have killed the excuses that have been causing the change to die in your life and for you to lose your change.
Told you in my own shoes, do whatever makes me feel good. Read about me, move the style, shit get feelings, soon will be gone. But I found myself more lost than ever, slaved it down to my desire. That's not freedom. Always feel more like Jesus every day, more like Jesus. Crucify my flesh with yours. My new life might be secure. Everything I do is also I can honor you. Resurrect me, sanctify, make me into your image. Oh, like Jesus. Yeah,
Students, listen, why should you keep the change? Well, number one, you need to keep the change for yourself. But I know for many, many of you, there are people very close to you who need change in their life. For years and years and years, I prayed for my mom, I prayed for my family to know Jesus, but it was not until I finally learned how to keep the change in my life, after years of trying to follow him, that I began to see a lot change in the lives of those around me because they saw that I could keep my change. So do it for them. Change is going to cause change. If you want change in your parents' marriage, show them that it can happen in your life. Be the example. Keep the change. Keep the change. The band's going to keep playing. You're welcome. Stay as late as you want in worship. I'm going to pray. But if you want to leave, you're dismissed when I say amen. Father, I pray for these students. Lord, I pray that as they hear from you on what they need to change and what change they need to keep, Lord, that you would show them what excuse they need to kill. Maybe they give into the excuse that, it's just going to it's not harm anyone but me. No, kill it. Maybe just this once. No, kill it. Lord, help them know what they need to do to set themselves up for success in keeping the change that you have called them into, Lord. We love you, Jesus. Speak to us, I pray. Move in us, I pray.
Holy Spirit, make me more like Jesus. Every day, make me more like Jesus. Crucify my flesh because it's mine. Everything I do, I've done so